What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the TDR show. It is draft week. We got the draft coming out. I know this show's a little later than we usually do here on the podcast and on YouTube, but things happen, life happens. But we are excited about draft happening. It is happening this week finally. And we're at a weird stage because, doing a show right before the draft. I know a lot of people out there doing mocks, but we didn't really want to throw a mock out there before we do the rounds. And we didn't really want to kind of I've seen a lot of generic stuff out there. I didn't need to give you 20 more guys to buy or sell before the dynasty trade deadline or the draft, excuse me. So we said, hey, let's have some fun. So we're gonna have some fun today on today's show. It's gonna be a draft stock market. Jay's a millionaire. I don't know if anybody knows that. He does stocks. He's one of those guys that just does it all. So I figured we tie in kind of a stock market type game, looking at rookie values, looking at some players pre-draft and have a little fun with the games, guys that we're buying stock into right now. Obviously talk about them, but I'm assuming you've heard every single thing about these rookies at this point. I mean, everybody's pretty much talking to blue in the face, but we're going to invest in them with money. We'll go into that, talk about guys that we think could rise up the boards and just kind of watch them as we go. So we're going to have some fun with this. Jay's obviously smarter than me at this, so I expect him to win because this is his day life, but we'll see. And then we'll be talking about rookies, and we're excited you guys join us. If you're on YouTube, drop your team. You can have the same portfolio as us. You can follow along and play along with us here. We'll give you guys the options. You could drop their team here. If you're on the podcast listening, obviously you can make your own team as you go through it and listen to us as we go. All right. So like I said, draft stock market is what we're doing here. We each have $100. I will say this, the money and the allotments to players might not make 100% sense, but we're gonna blame Jay on that. That's Jay's fault. But essentially we're gonna invest in players, right? So I'm gonna go through the rules here. Jay can jump in at any point, but basically the concept is this: we have $100 to invest in these rookie prospects like stocks, and then we're going to basically track this. And a few weeks later, as we get into this, basically once the rookie just craziness dies down after a few weeks, we're going to look back here and see who won in their portfolio, who did a better job of investing in these guys and talking about them. So here are the rules. So the rules are simple. Each player gets a stock price. So Jay kind of made this sheet and said, hey, this is the stock price here. 100 across 5 or more plus players. You could do more. We kind of just stuck to 5, but if you want to do more, you can put in the comments and do that stuff there. Here's how the scoring system works. So basically we're going to invest in these players. The top price is $50 all the way down to $1. And then basically we're going to get a, draft capital return on investment, ROI, right? Everybody loves their ROI out there. Dynasty managers are all about it. So if that player gets picked in the top 10, they're going to get plus 25%. So when you're looking at like a Cam Ward, you're going to spend $50 on Cam Ward, you get that plus 25% because he's probably going to go top 10. And then each pick will get more. So 11 to 20 is plus 15. If they get picked 21 to 32, it's plus 10. Round 2 is plus 7. Round 3 is plus 5. Round 4 or later, we actually give you negative 15%. I don't know where I pulled that number, I'll be honest with you, but it just looked good, right? So you're going to get negative if you're going to draft some guys later based on what you put them in there. And then also, when we get into like the scoring system, it's also landing spot bonus. So if they get to an elite landing spot, is 20%. We're going to determine if it's elite, like me and Jay. We're going to figure that out. Average is 5%. So it's okay. It's one of those landing spots where we're okay with, we'll live with, but it doesn't necessarily mean smash. And then disaster, just depth chart, scheme fit, really bad, negative 10% there. Did I explain that okay, Jay? Do you want to drop in anything else in terms of scoring system or how we're going to kind of do this?
No, that sounds good. Obviously here there's a lot of preference towards, the higher your player gets drafted. Not necessarily the talent level, but just the higher your player gets drafted, the more return you get for that. So that's a big piece of it. And then at least right now as far as like the landing spots go, like we don't know much of the draft. So there's going to be a little bit of a chance here. So you can play, like, I think this is a talent player and I think good teams will go draft him higher than expected and he'll play. Or you can kind of just go with, like, where is he kind of being mocked right now? Where are the pundits saying that he could get mocked? And then you can kind of figure out those types of things. So that's kind of the game here is trying to figure out, okay, who who's going to probably go higher in the draft than you might expect, based on the where you're seeing them in drafts versus where they're getting mocked, and where they actually get drafted. And so I think that's the fun of it, is trying to just kind of guess which players might get drafted a little bit higher than you might expect.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the players as well. Like, we'll get into them. Again, we've in nauseum talked about a lot of these guys. So a lot of you guys that listen to this pod, which I'm very appreciative of you guys, because you guys know kind of where we're pretty much standing on a lot of these prospects for the most part. Like, we know Jay's a Caleb Johnson truther. We know kind of, in terms of who I like in this process and where they're at. But this also gives us a chance to say, hey, yeah, we'll throw some money on that, in that investment of like, hey, that's who we want. So let's get into it. So here's our picks. So we're going to go through each kind of group of guys if we have picks in that tier. So essentially we just put them into the puddles, right? So this is the $50 tier here. So here are the players that you could pick from. So again, if you're playing along, here are some guys that you can pick from. You have $100. You want to pick two of these guys, just ride it out. You go right ahead, right? Like, that's kind of how we're looking at their portfolio. So here's who you can pick from: Ashton Genty, Amarion Hampton, Cam Ward, Tet McMillan, Travion Henderson, Tyler Warren, and Travis Hunter. So essentially the elite group, this is kind of generally the tier of guys where we're seeing the rookie drafts kind of go into that range here. Do you have a pick from these guys, or just in general, what is your take on the $50 tier?
Yeah, my pick here in part of my portfolio is $50. Now, the way we have it set up is you have to get to 5 players, so I don't think you can do 2 in this category. Otherwise, I probably would have been.
Well, that's fair. I already screwed up. I already did. See, this is why you're here, because I already messed up with the rules, and we're freaking 7 minutes into this podcast.
But yeah, I went with Cam Ward. I am not high on the QBs in this draft. Yeah. But what I'd say is that Cam Ward's going mid first round, sometimes as high as 1.03, sometimes as high as 1.01 if you're in a superflex league and you need the quarterback. So he's in this top tier, but he right now, I mean, it's a fairly, as we sit here on Tuesday, almost before the NFL draft, it's a pretty good lock that Cam Ward goes number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans. And so in this scoring system, we're going to get that highest level of percent returns on a highest dollar value, this $50 value here. So that to me is like the obvious one, where, people will start to get excited, get a little interested in Cam Ward, who was going 1.05 to now going 1.03 to now, should he be picked at 1.02 ahead of Tet McMillan? Probably not in front of Ashton Genty, because he'll probably go top 5 as well. But that's kind of where we're thinking. And then as far as landing spots go, I can't really argue that the Tennessee Titans is going to get me that like elite landing spot bump. But what I would say is I do think it should qualify for the average type of bump there that you get. So they got a decent O-line. Their pass catchers are not great. You got Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks, Van Jefferson, Chig at tight end. But here's the thing that I think could happen that might bump it a little bit is they draft Cam Ward with the first overall pick, and then you come around in the second round and grab, because wide receiver is as high as a need. They've done a lot at the offensive line. I do think that they could come back to wide receiver there in the second round. Yeah. And then that makes this landing spots that much slightly better. And you see a lot of teams, they grab the quarterback, they invest in it, and then in him, and then you have to invest around him. And so I think there's a good possibility that wide receiver spot for the second round pick for the Titans could be an early second round wide receiver, like a Luther Burden, like whoever falls out of that first round. Probably Emeka Egbuka could fall. Matthew Golden could fall. Any one of these wide receivers that maybe possibly makes it out of the first round. And then you got Calvin Ridley, Luther Burden, and then, a combination of Treylon Burks and Van Jefferson for the third guy. Maybe that makes a lot of sense, and maybe that helps Cam Ward. So that's why I'd argue for at least the average type of landing spot bump in sort of my price there.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think that they could possibly add to that room there. This you already knew that I was going to start asking you questions that you weren't prepared for. So here's your first one. Cam Ward, we've been having this discussion. It's been great discussion on Discord. You should go hop in it. I know that a lot of people have been diving into it. So we kind of had a mini discussion today about Cam Ward of like player comps, and not necessarily player, but career comps. So we're not doing player comp. Like our player comp and our rookie guy that's dropping next week is Sam Darnold. That's the one that Christian came up with in terms of what he could see with Cam Ward. The career, like what could he be in his career? And that's really just awful to like do before he's even played a snap. But that's what we do. Like we're sports fans. We talk about this all the time. So mine was Derek Carr. I said he could have a Derek Carr like career where he's not bad, but he's not great, where he's fine. Like he can be a franchise quarterback. I use air quotes for those listening on the podcast because he could probably lead a team, but I don't know how like happy you are with him being like a Super Bowl leading quarterback type guy. Jameis Winston was in our Discord as well. They talked about, hey, I could see him have a Jameis Winston type career. And then there was an argument over whether Jameis Winston had a good career or not. But where are you at with him? Like, do you have an idea? I know you don't do comps, Barry. You don't like comps, but if you were comfortable, like from a dynasty perspective, so I talked about a show like 12 to 18 range. Where are you at with him?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I put him at back end QB2, mid to back end QB2, and that's kind of how I'd think about. So like the ceiling, if everything goes right, is you get to the top end of QB2. So you're talking about QB 13 ish.
Yeah,
that's if everything goes right. But as far as my process goes and the way I evaluate quarterbacks, none of these quarterbacks are high end QBs. It's just that he's getting the draft capital and he's getting the situation and the benefit of the doubt and all the resources here, being the first overall pick, to maybe make something of it that maybe he wouldn't have gotten if he was, say, a mid first or a late first or even a second round pick. And so I honestly, if I was looking at Cam Ward in this draft and I was looking at it versus last year, he'd be pretty far down the list of QBs, even though he really is going first overall in this draft. So that's kind of how I think about it. If I was going to place him, I'd place him, somewhere in the back end of the QB2 range. So to compare to last year, the profile to me lines up a lot with like what a Michael Penix was, and Michael Penix went well in the first round. So that's not to say anything bad, but it was kind of like let's sit for a while, learn, and then he finally ended up getting in, and then we'll see what happens with Michael Penix. But I think the career arc is somewhat similar in that just not a lot of production, enough production, but not a lot of like experience age adjusted production throughout most of his career, but then had a spike year at the end. Then goes in the first round, get some resources. That's the kind of the arc that I see. And that's not to say that in fantasy that QBs, even of Michael Penix, will not be valuable, because they'll definitely be valuable. It's just, are you going to get into that upper, mid QB1 to upper QB1 range? That I feel like that's a little bit out of his range of possibilities for me. The ceiling is more QB2, high end QB2 kind of guy.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, I knew you were going to throw out player comps because that's just not your thing. So I wanted to give you an out. I wanted to give you an off ramp to the value range. But I do think Derek Carr is as like a career comp, not a player. Please don't go in the comments and yell at me about it. He doesn't look like I'd get Derek Carr from a player comp this time, but a career Carr, I could see that. I think that being serviceable is perfectly fine. I just don't know if I see that elite level, right? I don't know if I see that there in terms of that. As far as my pick, I'll be quicker in this. I went back and forth because it was either Ashton or Travis Hunter, right? It's either Ashton Jeanty or Travis Hunter, because I think both are locked in the top 10 capital. So like I want that plus percentage there. But I'm going to go with the guy that I'm sure, because there's been rumors now where Ashton Jeanty might fall, or there's like some things out there. I'm going to take Travis Hunter. I think he goes top 5, and he's going to get that plus 25%. He sounds like the Browns, and it sounds like he's going to be a wide receiver. So now I'm all aboard. Like it does seem like if he goes to the Browns, I don't know how you can be I don't know how you can be a part-time corner. I really feel like that's a position that you really got to play full-time, learn it. And I know he can kind of spot and do some things, but I really think based on all like the offseason stuff and everything that he's talked about, Hunter wants to play wide receiver. Like, I really think that that's the area that he wants to go to. We know where the money is at. And so, if he does go to the Browns, you're talking about that's a great landing spot because there's no one else there. I'm sorry, Jerry Judy truthers. Like, I just can't with you guys. You guys are absolutely crazy out there. But to me, Hunter becomes wide receiver 1 in that offense. The only down part you could say is the quarterbacks. Those Kenny Pickett haters. No, there's plenty of them. Then you deserve to get hated on, Kenny Pickett. But then you have Joe Flacco, coming there. I think with me, it's Travis Hunter. Great spot. I know you mentioned the show sheet too. They could take a quarterback in the second round, possibly Jackson Dart, possibly one of those quarterbacks, maybe a little early. So I'll take Travis Hunter. I think I like his upside. I like that if he's going to play wide receiver, I love his ceiling. Top 5, very good spot in terms of where he can go. So I'm on board there.
So do you think that the Browns are an average landing spot, or do you think they fall into the disaster landing spot?
Oh no, I think it's average for sure. I think the thing is what do we want out of a wide receiver going in that top range? Is he going to get targets? Yes. So he could lead the team in targets. I think we even with Judy there. I think the reason why it doesn't actually push it higher for me is because the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Like I don't like necessarily love the quarterbacks, but we have seen Joe Flacco provide fantasy level type wide receiver 2-1. Like, he could do that. Like, Flacco can do that. Now, he's also old as hell, and last year he struggled a ton. So Kenny Pickett as well, when you think of Kenny Pickett, we haven't seen him do that and produce it. So that's why I would say it's average. But if they draft a quarterback in a second round, then I think it's solid as an average. Yeah. I think it is leaning towards disaster a little bit with that quarterback position, but I'm still going to stick with average.
Yeah, let's say the Travis Hunter doesn't get picked too. I'd say the only I think Travis Hunter is an elite level athlete or asset. So the only way that I think it turns into a disaster is if he goes to a place that wants to play him primarily at cornerback.
Yeah.
And the comment was from Jeremiah was major in wide receiver, minor in cornerback. What if you get a team that sees him as a cornerback, that wants him to play a little wide receiver? And that would be the only place where he, to me, in my opinion, would then turn into sort of that disaster landing spot for him and his fantasy outtake.
Mm-hmm. And that's totally fair. That is totally fair. I just don't see him getting past the Browns. I think they're locked into that pick. I think it's locked in. They want him.
Yeah.
Locked in.
And this group, I think, like Cam Ward, I think is pretty locked in at 1. Ashton Genty is I'll say Travis Hunter is probably a top 5 pick for sure.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them, like you said, Ashton Genty is probably the next one up there. But the rest of them could fall. There's a situation. I mean, Ashton Genty's awesome, probably a Raider, but like he's a running back, and running backs don't the devaluation of the position that he could fall outside of the top 10, and that's the risk level of why you take a Cam Ward and Travis Hunter in this type of setup game.
Yeah, 100%. All right. We're going to jump to the $40 tier, which no one took anybody in this $40 tier. We did not like the price point here. So we'll talk about that. So here's in the $40 tier here. Quinshon Judkins, Shedeur Sanders, man, he is a wild card. Shedeur is one of those guys. Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, and Caleb Johnson. We had in that $40 tier. I guess I could just start with why didn't you take anybody here? I think our pricing was a little off here. Maybe pricing should have been fixed, but just in general, I know you're about to give me some nerdy answers. So go ahead, nerdy answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, we already put $50 in, and if you're trying to get to 5 players and $100, it's hard to take a 50 and a 40. Otherwise, you're stuck with a bunch of ones at the end. I was really tempted to take Colston Loveland. I think he is one of the better players in the draft overall. But then I also think there's a lot of teams that do need tight end, and I do think he has a good chance of going in the first round. I love Emeka Egbuka. I love Luther Burden. I just think that those 2 players have a chance of falling. I'd really like to see them go in the first round, but there's also a chance where wide receivers fall into that second round or fall into the back end. I think Colston Loveland could be a mid first round pick if at all possible, but also so could Emeka as well.
Yeah.
Shadur Sanders is the interesting. I think in this type of setup, you'd want to grab QBs because they tend to get overdrafted, and what we're trying to do is find players that could get pushed up. But I like I said, I've never been really high on this QB class. I mean, back in December, I put out my rankings for these QBs, which gets you almost 75% of the way to the analytical numbers that you see, maybe 80% of all the other analytics guys that put out back in December. I was like, this QB class is a bunch of tier 3 guys for me. Shadur Sanders is the third best in that tier 3 group, and yet he has the name ability, he has
Yeah.
the flashiness, and I think that could push him up in the draft. I think there could be a chance all it takes is one team to take him. And generally QBs get pushed up a little bit higher than maybe they should potentially go. So that's an interesting one in terms of like playing the strategy and trying to grab the QBs, but really kind of running out of money here to use any of these 40 tier guys, especially with the risk of, to me, honestly, all these guys could end up in the second round. Every single one of these guys could be a second or third round guy in terms of Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Johnson. So, it's tough to use the $40 amount on guys that are not locks for the first round.
Yeah, no, it is hard. I think Shador was the one I almost wish Shador, man, because if he goes top 10 at $40, I mean, you get that price. That's how you could
Yep.
win. That's how you win. But he could also fall out of the freaking first round, and now you're sitting there with that's how you lose too. But that's why I don't really invest in stocks too much. Jay knows all about that. Like Jay's all about the area there. I think Colson is the interesting one because he's been getting a lot of top 15 buzz, right? Like
Yep.
he's been getting top 15 player on the board buzz, like not just, just from a fantasy perspective, but from like the NFL draft perspective. There are some teams that have him and Warren as top 8 players. That's what Todd McShay's talked about. That's what a lot of guys have talked about. I mean, it would not shock me to see, they were talking about it today on the McShay podcast, and they were saying that Loveland is a top 10 players on some people's boards, right? And whether he goes there or not, that's part of it. I think that's something that you got to think about too in your drafts when we're thinking of Colson Loveland. Gosh, man, I think he's super undervalued right now, right? And I think he's going to continue to stay that way because I don't think is there a landing spot for Loveland where you're like, oh gosh, top 5 guy? I don't know. I don't think so. Because there's really, what is the best landing spot in the first round, do you think, for a tight end? The Colts? Because I don't think that's a great landing spot. The Jets?
The Rams, Chargers, Eagles, Chiefs, Colts,
So all back end.
all need tight ends.
Yeah. So all background first, though, right? So like I guess with Kelsey still being there, I guess the Rams, they've been linked to Loveland a lot. I know that I've seen that a lot there. But they still have Adams, they still have Puka, they still have Kyron to extent. I know he doesn't catch a ton of passes, but like I don't know if there's a really big landing spot to where I'm like, yes, Loveland top 5, yes, locked in. I still think he's going to be a value.
Yeah, and this is the game versus what we think of these guys. I really like Colston Loveland. I think he's a really special prospect. I don't have him as a tier 1 prospect, but he's close. He's like one of those guys that are very, very close. I have Ashton Genty and Tet McMillan, and then Colston Loveland's the next guy there. Now, if I was in a Dynasty rookie draft, I wouldn't draft him 3rd overall. But it just goes to show you, I think he has a high probability of becoming a tight end 1 for his position. But yeah, I really like Colston Loveland. I think there's a lot of value to Luther Burden now. I think he's getting pushed down too far. Luther Burden's my 2nd overall wide receiver. I think there's always been a value to Emeka Egbuka. Even if he goes in the 2nd round, I think he's one of those guys that can really help you in fantasy. So that's interesting as well.
All right, let's jump over to the 3rd one because we made some picks here. So
yeah,
right now, Jay's got Cam Ward because he's a coward, and then nothing. And then I have Travis Hunter because I like wild card picks. I'm just kidding. I'm kind of a coward too. And then we get into $30. So this is where our different minds go different ways here. So I have Jackson Dart in this tier, Matthew Golden, Cam Scatterbo, Trey Harris, Jalen Monroe, and Jaden Higgins. So this is, I feel like there's 2 guys that stand out to me in this tier that are like, I'm going to draft these guys. Who did you go with and why?
Well, so we're playing the game of draft capital, basically who gets drafted higher, and running backs kind of get thrown out, right?
Yeah.
So the Scaraboo lovers, the Caleb Johnson guys, the Quinshon Junkin guys, the problem with picking those guys is they hardly ever get like huge increases in draft capital, just because of the devaluation position. So I'd say the ones that get overdrafted the most are usually quarterbacks and wide receivers. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to go after Jackson Dart and Matthew Golden, in this tier. Maybe even Jalen Milroe, a guy that was invited to the draft. Maybe there's a team that really wants to take him at the end of the first, or trade up into the end of the first and take him. That could be interesting as well. But I went with Matthew Golden. I think this is a sort of a mispricing here. I think this wide receiver group is pretty interesting. Each NFL team is going to, kind of covet a different one of these guys because they have a different set of skill sets. Right now, Matthew Golden is the wide receiver number one for a couple of very, very famous NFL draft analysts that are very, very plugged in. And so I think Golden at this tier is a guy that could be possibly even the first wide receiver taken out of all wide receivers, even though I have him a little bit, but I have him as wide receiver 4, I believe. I think he's wide receiver 4, including if you include Travis Hunter in there. I got him wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5-ish range. And so, but the game we're playing here is we're trying to get guys that we think that will get drafted higher than sort of where we can get them in sort of rookie drafts type of thing. So when you go through mock draft database, the mock drafts where I see him mocked most: Packers, Cowboys, Seahawks, Panthers, Cardinals, Rams. But really those first 3, Packers, Cowboys, Seahawks, like a lot of times in the first, over and over again in the first. So if there's anything you can read into the tea leaves of any of that stuff, maybe Matthew Golden, for $30, I get him somewhere in the first, and I get a big jump in price. I think it's really hard to gauge the landing spot because we're just kind of guessing. But in each one of these situations, I think that there's room for him to be a wide receiver 2 for most of these landing spots. I don't necessarily see him maybe as that like high tier 1 wide receiver 1 type of guy, but can he be the consistent wide receiver 2 or high end wide receiver 2? Sure. And so that was kind of my thought process on taking him early, mid to late first round, maybe even the first wide receiver off the board, and I can get him here at $30.
I've been seeing a lot of Cowboys talk. I don't know how real that is. I don't know where that is at 12, or whether they would trade back, or if that's a smokescreen and they're going to go offensive lineman. I've been seeing that a little bit more too. I don't know. I don't know how that kind of is going to play out, but what I do know is like, that's a good pick. I didn't go Matthew Golden because I want to be different, because, that's the fun in this. But I do think the other guy, I took Jackson Dart for my portfolio, and it really just comes down to, I think the quarterbacks are a tough sell in this class. I think Shador is dropping down, but there's so much smoke out there about Jackson Dart being a lot of teams QB2. It's got to be true somewhere. There's got to be some teams here that say, yes, we like Jackson Dart more than Shador. Maybe they're more analytical driven, right? We talked about the metric stuff with Dart. We've talked about that before when we talked about analytics versus film. And there are probably teams that look at Dart and saying he's the more superior option. So there is a chance Dart gets drafted in the first. I don't think so, but I'm betting on it, right? So this is one of those things where I'm like, maybe a team, like there are so many desperate teams in that back end. I mean, at the beginning of the first round, the Browns, the Giants, all those teams there that could move up and draft him in the first. And so I just think that based on, if he can go in that range of the 21 to 32, if I can get 10%, that's great, to match a little bit of what Golden could possibly get, which is 15% if he goes 11 to 20, which he could possibly do that too. But I don't mind. I think he is going round 2 no matter what. So I'll take the 7% bump there. I think that Jackson Dart is a second round quarterback just based on the need out there for the spots. And then it just comes down to landing spot, because I do think that, like you said, if Dart goes to a team that needs a quarterback, that's an elite landing spot, in my opinion, based on them needing a quarterback. Like if there's no competition there, where you like we mentioned, Golden could go to a team with the CD Lamb. Do we love that spot for him? It's an average landing spot, right? So like a little gamemanship in terms of, I don't know. I'll have to sell you on like elite landing spot, but at least good landing spot. If Dart goes to an average spot, like a spot where he can compete right away, I'm cool with that. Like I'm very okay with where Dart goes. So I took Dart. So I got Dart and Hunter. You got Matthew Golden and Cam Ward. Anything else on any of these other guys?
Yeah, I think Jaden Higgins would be an interesting bet too. I've seen him kind of rising up boards. A lot of people like him. He's got a unique physical profile there for him, and so yeah, he would be an interesting one of somebody taking a shot maybe on him in the late first, early second type of guy. But I was going. I think Matthew Golden's got the higher draft potential. I think Jackson Dart probably, if you're betting on upside, if you want to take the risk and bet on the upside, you probably go with Jackson Dart because maybe some team overdrafts him.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right, let's go to $20 based on our terrible scoring here, and none of us took any of these guys. But I'll ask a question with this group. I'm going to say, based on these guys: Devin Neal, Dylan Sampson, Alec Manor, Ollie Gordon, Isaiah Bond, Elijah Arroyo. Could you see any of these guys going in the second round?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which one though? Because not the running backs, right? I couldn't see any of these running backs go second round. Isaiah Bond seems like he's dropping. I think it comes down to Ao Manor and Elijah Arroyo.
Yeah, I think Ao Manor and Elijah Arroyo. Ao Manor, I think, is on mock draft database is going 69, and Elijah Arroyo is going 62. So that's like pretty close to second round there. I would say I know this gets me in a little trouble, but Elic Aominer's profile is not terrible from a data perspective. It actually is pretty good. The problem that I get is that everybody that watches him is like a little concerned with his profile. But if you want to take a decent size or a good bet on a player that has a pretty good data profile that people aren't really that interested in right now, Ao Manor seems like a pretty good bet right now. If there's any NFL teams that are out there that do pay attention to the data profiles, he's done pretty good from an experience adjusted basis on a lot of metrics. He looks good. He's a good size profile too. I mean, he's 206 pounds. Six almost 6'2", 206 pounds. 26.6 BMI. Like he's a decent option for teams, and so I could see him being pushed up a little bit, getting pushed up a little bit. There are basically 5 tight ends, so that I'm like kind of interested in, maybe 6 tight ends. Elijah Arroyo is one of them, and there's more than 5 or 6 teams that need tight ends. So I think that there's a chance that he could get pushed up. I mean, he's super athletic as well. Not a lot of college production, but he's another interesting guy too. But yeah, I think Ao Manor would probably qualify as one of my sleepers for this draft because I think he does have a pretty decent numbers profile, but he kind of gets pushed down quite a bit when you're looking at rookie drafts. Going in the early third round of most drafts. So that'd be the guy that I think could probably get pushed up.
Yeah, but we have no idea. Listen, us drafters pre-draft, we have no idea what we're doing. Like, I mean, I just go back to Jalen Polk going in the second round. Guys like that, Xavier Leggett, just for some guys that reached Terrace Marshall. Like, there's guys that have gone. I don't know actually. Where did Terrace Marshall go? Do you remember? Did he go round 3, 4? Man,
I can't remember.
Did I get that wrong? Come on. How do you not have every draft capital embedded into your brain? Because you are the sheets master. You should second round. Yeah. See, I was right. He did go in the second round. We can always bet on Carolina reaching for a second round wide receiver. That is definitely something that we could do. So like I could definitely see, Alec doing that, getting that second round capital there. Elijah's interesting too. Like he's across the board. I mean, he's a really like mocked pick for the Eagles at 32. Like I've seen that like 17 different times, like in there. And to be honest, of all the mock drafts I've seen, when you're going through like the mock draft database, I would say of the last 20 going through it, he's gone to second round at least 18 of those 20 times. Like he is definitely getting mocked there. So you're seeing a lot of different areas there in terms of a team that needs the tight end going the first 2 rounds. So I think Arroyo is one of those guys. He's a sleeper for me. Like I think that he's one of those guys that could go in the second round. And we always see tight ends do that. We see tight ends get bumped up there. And then if he does, I think we got to start seriously talking about Arroyo being a second round rookie pick. In terms of drafts, like if it's tight end premium, for sure, I think he's going to get bumped up there. That is the one thing, not to go on a tangent, but that's the one, seeing the tight ends and where they go and the earlier they go, that's the one position who might be able to shift some of these rookie drafts. Like, I don't know how much shifting we're going to see, but I think in the second round for sure, depending on tight ends capital, we will start seeing maybe some players get shifted a little bit. I think that's the position to watch the first 2 nights.
Yeah,
All right.
generally that's the case because tight ends, you don't produce very much in college, and not a lot of people know who they are. And you have maybe a few of them go off at the combine that test incredibly athletic, and people get excited about those. But I think you're still in like the discovery process, and you need the draft to kind of figure out the draft capital to figure out who are the guys you want to bet on, and then those guys can get pushed up quite a bit if teams invest draft capital in those guys.
There's some guy. It's so funny because, like you say, like, we're so deep into this because we're just ridiculous and we're just nerds. But there are people that don't even know some rookies' names still. Like, I know people in some Discords like, yeah, I don't even care. He's like, I start learning about him as soon as they get drafted, and I'm like, that's great. Like, good for you, man, because I envy you based on all of that. All right, let's jump over the $10 tier, and then we'll wrap it up with $5 and $1. So for the $10, Bayshaw Tootin's here, Harold Fannin, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens, Jalen Royals, and Mason Taylor. Jay took my guy, which was Mason Taylor. So I'll talk about the guy I'll take. I'll take DJ Giddens. I think that there's a chance, when you're thinking of like, all right, who could get third round? Really what we're looking for in this range is getting that third round capital so we don't get the dock for the fourth round. Who are some guys? I think Mason Taylor's an amazing pick. Everybody knows he's my tight end 3. I'm a big fan of Taylor. But I think Giddens going to get third round capital too. I really think a team's going to like DJ Giddens and his upside from a 3-down workhorse perspective. You cannot hate his freaking production from the last 2 years. When you're looking at just the 1,500 yards total from receiving and rushing standpoint. And when you're kind of going through, he did okay in terms of his combine results. I thought he was good. 4.43 40-yard dash is what he wants to do, almost a 40-inch vertical. So from a testing standpoint, you like that. When you're going through kind of where he's getting mocked, it is in the 4th round. But there's a few teams out there I think could take him in the 3rd. Like, I really think the Steelers could be an option for him. I think the Browns are an option for him. I think even the Cowboys, if they decide to wait in that running back spot, are an option for him in the 3rd, possibly the Broncos if they wait. So I still think 3rd round is a possibility. So I'll take Giddens here.
Yeah, like that. And I took Mason Taylor here. I think he's right now in mock draft database at 44. So early to mid second here. Like I mentioned before, sort of the setup in terms of how many teams need tight ends versus how many really good tight ends there are. I think Colston Loveland is the top of tier 2 for me. Tyler Warren's the bottom of tier 2 for me. And then you got, I think, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, Junin, Elijah Arroyo, and Terrence Ferguson in tier 3. And I think then there's a giant gap between the next level of tight ends. And so I think sort of supply and demand here, maybe some of these tight ends, some of those 6 tight ends go a little bit earlier than you might expect. Right now I'm mocking at number 44. I'm seeing him a lot too. Rams, Chargers, Eagles, Chiefs. Those are kind of the teams that if you go through who's mocking him to those names, and those happen to be the teams that need the tight ends. You might maybe throw the Colts in there or something like that. But so probably 2nd round, maybe sneaks into the 3rd round. But that's decent upside for this group of players. You got some running backs in here. I like Jalen Royals, but I think Mason Taylor has the best odds to go the highest of this group.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm smashing Mason Taylor. Let's go. Like the draft Mason Taylor. Like I don't know. There's a lot of hatred out there for Mason Taylor, but it's funny too. So I think we've mentioned the Rams, Chargers, the Eagles, Chiefs multiple times for a tight end. At a certain point, those teams are going to draft one, and these tight end spots are going to get used up, and then we're going to be like, where the hell are these guys going to go? So, like I think the Bears are in the market for a tight end in rounds 2 or 3. Like I think that they could with Cole Kmet. And then how do we feel about like both those guys being there? Because it happens every year, you know that. Like these tight ends go to a spot with like already a contract laden tight end there. You're like, damn it, like what are we going to do with these guys here? So that's always the funny part of this. All right, we're going to wrap it up with our 5 and first dollar tiers. A lot of value here still on the board. So Damian Martinez finds himself in the $5. Jack Beck, Quinn Ewers, Xavier Restrepo, who I think is still running his 40-yard dash. Will Howard, Jordan James is also out there. And then I don't know. Did I mess up here? Did I take a hold on? Let me check the $1. No, I took Kyle Williams. Was Kyle Williams in there? I thought he was.
Yeah, he's in there.
Okay, I just forgot to put him in there.
Just to make the sheet. Yeah.
Yeah, so Kyle Williams, I put in the $5 tier. So I'm going to take Kyle Williams. And you know why? I don't know. I don't know what happened with the Washington State wide receiver in terms of like his value. I know he did the Senior Bowl, he did all of those things, but that dude's freaking projected round mock draft is like 3rd round right now. So when has ever mock drafts ever gotten us in trouble, Jay? So I'm going to lean here. This could be puts me over the top right here. I think my Kyle Williams getting 3rd round capital, possibly I've seen the Seahawks get there. I've seen the Patriots kind of move up in terms of what they're looking for. I've seen the Lions even in there, the Cardinals. Like there's a lot of teams I think in that 3rd round that might need a wide receiver that missed out on that first tier of guys, or even that second tier of guys that maybe are gone or they just don't like for their fit. And I think a guy like Kyle Williams might fit their board. Like I like him as a receiver. I don't love him. I think there's things that he does well. There's things that he doesn't do well. We wrote about him in the rookie guide, so you can check that out as it gets produced there. But I do think that he can get capital, and I'll take that. I mean, he might go in the 3rd round.
Yeah. And remember, there's this on the 4th round, there's a big drop off. Yeah, there's a minus 15% for 4th round or later. So we're trying to get guys that we think can go in the 3rd round. And hopefully don't fall 4, 5, 6. And as you get down into the $5 and $1 tier, it's sparser and sparser. But I do think the 2 that I picked here were Damian Martinez and Jack Batch. Jack Batch currently going 66 on mockdraft database, commonly mocked to Patriots, Steelers, Commanders, Jets, Raiders, Jags. Teams that probably need that next complementary wide receiver. I think he could be that wide receiver. He's a great story. He had the start out as a tight end at LSU, did a transfer, converted to the wide receiver. Produced fairly well his first year, so it's not it's a terrible 0 type of profile as well. The numbers are somewhat decent. Goes to the Senior Bowl, does well. Had that unfortunate incident with his brother, handled it really, really well. I think teams are going to really like him. So I do think that there's upward pressure on him, just sort of his personality, what he was able to do, and what he can do in the NFL. So I think that's an interesting one. And I also took Damian Martinez. I really like his profile. I think this is another one that kind of could be a sleeper for me, kind of like A.O. Manor. Damian Martinez might be that guy for me at the running back position. I think he's a guy that could sneak into the back end of that 3rd round for running backs. And I think he'd be a really good complement. Again, data profile is not terrible. It's a decent data profile. So, I don't assign really, really high probabilities to these guys that are in tier 3 or tier 4. But, if you have a good data profile and then you get a little bit better draft capital, I think he could be one of those guys that is a decent sleeper. You don't have to pay very much for him in your fantasy drafts either. So I do think that he could be one of those guys that does rise a little bit. He's currently going 95th. Generally, I see him get mocked to those teams that need the running back. So Cowboys, Browns, Giants, Patriots, Steelers. I think he could be a cool complement to what the Dolphins have going on. If you're concerned about Alexander Madison, maybe you draft Damian Martinez and he could be the offset to Devin Achane.
Yeah.
Or a Chan. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I think he could kind of get pushed up. And I wanted to use my full $100 here. I'm not going to leave any money on the table by selecting any of these $1 guys for my fifth year.
Oh, you just took it. CJ just took a shot at me because I took a dollar guy and I left money on the table. But I'm so confident in my damn picks that I don't need all my money. I'm giving that I'm throwing that $4 back into the pot, and someone else can have it there. But I do like the Damian Martinez call. I think he's getting slept on a little bit. I think he could be one of those guys that is in the league for 8 years, right? Like I think he's one of those guys that could just be that rotational guy there. And I like that there. I took a dollar guy. I'm not going to read through everybody in this tier, but there's still some guys out there that you can kind of go through. I took Terrence Ferguson, so I don't know why he's hating on my guy Terrence Ferguson. So I kind of had a theory in this. Is we've been talking about tight ends enough that someone might take him in the 3rd round just based on, I don't know, maybe just needing that tight end position. Definitely tested well. I mean, is a very solid. It would not shock me to see Terrence Ferguson be like just a very solid pro for 10 years, right? Like a Terrence Ferguson type. And there's not a ton of mocks out there, mock draft database, and just where his capital is right now. Him going later than like the 4th or even the 3rd, but 4th is probably his floor. So I'll take that upside, right? I'll take that shot there and say, hey, he'll get drafted somewhere, kind of go through it. And so that wraps up my team. So here's my team. And again, if you're watching it on YouTube and you want to kind of keep a team here, we can keep tabs. I got Travis Hunter, Jackson Dart, DJ Giddens, Kyle Williams, and Terrence Ferguson are the money I'm spending on my portfolio. And then Jay's got Cam Ward, Matthew Golden, Mason Taylor, Jack Betch, whatever, and then Damian Martinez. He uses $400. I use $96 if I can do math, but I was a history major. So that's kind of where I'm at there. Did you want to talk?
You're holding cash because the market's so volatile right now that you don't want to get one of those minus 15%ers.
Hey,
so you're just gonna hold cash. You're gonna keep that for $4 and let it just stay $4.
Sir, these draft day tariffs, they're killing me. All right, if we're talking about these tariffs out here on draft day, you can't. You gotta be careful on these streets. If you start talking like that fantasy football is luck, you get Dynasty, the people with Dynasty in their name, they start coming after you. So you got to be careful how you talk about fantasy football nowadays. All right, so that's our teams. I know we already talked about one. Terrence Ferguson as a dark horse stock, as someone's there. Tell me about Kyle McCord, because you added him to your list. So tell me in terms of like day 2 pick, where are you at with Kyle McCord, quarterback out of Syracuse?
Formerly at Ohio State, so I'm very familiar with Kyle McCord. I think he's an interesting profile. I'm not crazy high on him, but it's as far as like looking down at the very bottom of the list, who are guys that could potentially come in and gain a lot of fantasy value or gain a lot of value. Kyle McCord, I think, to me, is one of those guys. Now, I think he can. He's not incredibly mobile, so he doesn't have that to his game in terms of fantasy perspective. But he is like a sufficient pocket passer QB. He can command a decent offense. He can put up a lot of yards. He seems to know what he's doing when he's out there, and does a team, invest in him and being the backup for some time that maybe eventually can take over, or the starter gets injured and then he starts playing, and can he do well enough to keep his position? There's not a lot of great QB profiles in this group. Maybe Kyle McCord might be one of those guys that could do that. From a data perspective, there are some nuggets to like in this profile. So, I'm not like pounding the table on Kyle McCord. For me, he's a tier 5 quarterback, but so that means it's just a low probability of being like a QB1, QB2 type of guy. I see him more as a backup, but is it possible that he finds himself through injury or through hard work and some time as a starting QB in the NFL? Maybe, and then his value rises. And you might say that about some of all these quarterbacks, right? But you have to pay a little bit more for Jalen Monroe than you do for Kyle McCord. You have to pay a little bit more for Will Howard. You have to pay a little bit more for Quinn Ewers. You can basically get Kyle McCord for free, And that's kind of the down here at a dollar. Maybe he has that, potential upside that from it.
Yeah, no, I'm all aboard the McCord train. I really like what McCord can do from just a throwing perspective. I think he'd be a Drew Lock plus of someone maybe that finds opportunity that can really kind of move the ball around the field and give a team kind of some I don't know, productive quarterback play. I don't want to say it's gonna be perfect because it's not perfect, as we saw at Ohio State, we saw at Syracuse, but I do like that call. So that's kind of our portfolio game there. Those of you that are playing on podcasts, I can't let you hang on the $1 tier. So here's some other guys: Brashard Smith's out there, Jaden Blue, Nick Nash, Gunnar Helm, Tez Johnson, Savion Williams, Dylan Gabriel, Rondé Gadsden, Kyle McCord, Raheem Sanders, Donovan Edwards, Ty Felton. There's probably others out there. Basically, all the undrafted kids. I will say, Raheem Sanders is an interesting one. I think that a team is going to like him as a running back. I think if they look at his first 2 years, the former South Carolina kid or Arkansas kid, now he's at South Carolina, he came out. I think Raheem is another guy that definitely is someone on a board that could be higher there. So that's our draft stock market show. I know it's a little different than we usually do. Any final thoughts before we get into this draft coming up? I know. So what we are going to do, little programming notes. Me and Jay are going to be doing a mock draft as soon as the draft is over. We'll get that out to you this weekend. I'm going to talk to Jay about timing there. So we will get a rookie mock. We have our draft guide coming out, which is not just players, right? We see that all the time. Every company has that. We're going to have articles in it. We're going to have strategy. We have all kinds of stuff built in there. We're super excited to drop that for you guys on Monday. But any final thoughts now that we've wrapped up this off season of draft coverage, Jay, and we're going to get into the draft this weekend?
Yeah, we just couldn't do another mock draft. It was just too much. We'd done it so many. We were doing these things September, October December last year. And so in 2024. So it's been a long slog. I am so excited to do this first mock draft after the draft. I'm so excited for the draft. And this all this hard work, all this getting to know these players, and we're doing Devy, we're doing Campus Again. We're watching these players from when they're freshmen all the way through college, and now they're getting drafted in the NFL. We're so excited about all these players. There's players that we like. There's players that we don't like as much. But in all reality, it's such an accomplishment for all these players to get to the NFL draft and be in the NFL. We're excited for all these guys. Following these guys from before they were freshmen, when they were high school students, watching the tape, plugging in the max preps numbers into the spreadsheets, all this stuff, it culminates into the NFL draft and how they end up doing in the NFL. I'm excited. I can't wait for Thursday to come, and then we're gonna come really back. I'm gonna plug all that the draft capital into my spreadsheets and then come up with my index model numbers, and that'll be in the draft guide as well too. So I'm super excited to get going on that.
Yeah, no, we're excited to bring you guys that. And like you said, I'm just excited to see a lot of these guys achieve their dreams. Like, we've been watching these prospects play for a lot of time in college, and see them get drafted is awesome. And then we can start that discussion of that. And then I do know that second week after we do the mock, we will be dropping kind of like third, fourth round guys. I don't necessarily know if we're going to do a full mock, but guys that we definitely would target in that range, and maybe some like some, free agents pickups that you guys could look at when you guys dive into your rookie drafts there. So we got all that coming for you here. Jump into our Discord. Go check out our Substack below. We appreciate all of you guys that tune into us every week. We wouldn't be here without you. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys next week.